Imagine waking up at the same time every night, to the exact minute, with no explanation. What if it wasn't just a coincidence, but something far darker, more calculated? In one case, a young woman, alone in a Victorian manor, is haunted by shadowy figures and whispers that call her deeper into a chilling world. In the other, a traveler finds herself stuck in an endless tunnel, unable to escape the suffocating darkness, hearing footsteps echoing behind her. But no one is there. Hello everyone, I'm Dusky Nights, and I bring you real-life horror stories that will help you fall asleep. But before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Ever since I moved into an old Victorian manor, I have been experiencing the paranormal I never expected to inherit my grandmother's home. The Victorian manor that had been tucked away in the corner of my childhood memories, a house so large, so ancient, it seemed to breathe on its own. She'd left it to me after passing away suddenly, healthy, vibrant, and seemingly unaffected by age. Her death hit me like a shockwave. I hadn't prepared for it, though deep down, I knew she wasn't going to be around forever. I wasn't close to her, not really. There was an odd gap between us, a generation that neither of us knew how to bridge. As a child, I'd visit her now and then, but I never really understood the strange allure the manor had over her. The heavy curtains, the musty smell of old books, the antique furniture. All of it seemed like something out of a forgotten world, a world that never quite belonged to me. When the will was read, I learned I was the sole heir to her estate. And when the lawyer handed me the deed to the manor, I realized there was no way out. I was the one who would have to deal with all the strange things left behind. It was just a few days after the reading of the will that I began packing my things. I sold my car, left behind the city life I had spent years building, and started the journey to a place I hadn't truly thought about in over a decade. My grandmother had lived in a small town, so small that the map seemed to swallow it up. If you blinked, you'd miss it. The town had its quirks. Most people used carriages instead of cars, and some of the electronics didn't work past the town's boundaries. It was one of those quaint, sleepy towns where everyone knew everyone's business. A town stuck in the past where time seemed to crawl slower, like the world itself was holding its breath. It wasn't so much that the town felt trapped. It was more like the town didn't want to leave. When I arrived, the old baker waved to me from across the street. I'd vaguely remembered her from when I was a child. Her face was older, her hair graying, but she still had the same warm smile. "I'm sorry to hear about your grandmother," she said, her voice warm, but tinged with something darker, something I couldn't quite place. "It's been a while since you've been around. It's good to see you again." "Thank you," I replied, smiling faintly. "I'm just getting settled in. I don't have time to catch up just yet, but I'll be sure to swing by later." She gave me a lingering look, one that I could have sworn carried a weight of caution, before she nodded and returned to her shop. Something about the way she spoke made me uneasy. It was as if she knew something that I didn't. I made my way to the manor, a place so grand, so ancient, that even the air felt thick around it. The wrought iron gate that led to the manor's front yard creaked as I pushed it open. It was covered in ivy, the stone walls adorned with the marks of time. A deep breath left my lips as I stepped into the yard, looking up at the windows that seemed to stare back at me. It didn't take long for the driver to disappear down the road, leaving me alone with nothing but the wind and the manor. The house felt like a living, breathing entity. Its cold stone walls loomed over me like a predator waiting for its prey. When I entered, the first thing that hit me was the smell, a floral aroma, sweet yet off, like stale perfume wrapped around my senses. I dropped my suitcase and ran my fingers over the dust-covered furniture. The place was full of antiques, objects my grandmother had collected over the years, many of which I had never seen before. There were old books, their spines cracked and yellowed with age, sitting untouched on shelves. The air was thick with dust and memories, every corner holding secrets that I didn't know if I was ready to uncover. I couldn't shake the feeling that the manor was watching me. Each creak of the floorboards, each gust of wind outside made me more aware of the silence pressing in on me. I tried to shrug it off, but the unease didn't dissipate. The house felt cold, and it wasn't just the physical temperature. Something about the space felt off, like it wasn't quite right. But I pushed these thoughts away. It was a big old house. Of course it was going to feel weird at first, right? That night, I lay down in my grandmother's old bed, hoping for some rest, but sleep wouldn't come. The minutes ticked by in silence, broken only by the occasional gust of wind or the strange creaking of the house. I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. I don't know what woke me. Maybe it was the strange chill in the air. The room felt freezing, colder than it should have been, despite the thick blankets on my bed. I turned over, hoping to drift back to sleep, but as I did, I saw something that made my blood run cold. 3 tall, thin figures stood in the corner of the room. Their skin was too tight, their faces too pale. Their eyes, if you could call them eyes, burned, red, glowing like embers in the night. I froze, staring at them, unable to speak or move. I tried to convince myself it was a nightmare. I tried to rationalize it away, but the figures didn't move. They hovered. They were real. I reached for the nightstand light, but before I could turn it on, they let out an unholy shriek, a sound that sliced through the still air like a blade. In the blink of an eye, they vanished. The room returned to normal, the coldness dissipating. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat up, wide-eyed, staring into the darkness, hoping that what I had seen was just a figment of my imagination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Over the following week, the same thing happened every night at exactly 3 o'clock a.m. I would wake up to find the figures standing in my room. They didn't do anything, but their presence was enough to send me into a cold sweat every time. Sometimes they would stare at me. Sometimes they would look at the floor, but always, they would vanish when I tried to turn on the light. I started to notice strange things around the house as well. There were mirrors that appeared in places where I knew they hadn't been before. Old, ornate mirrors. They would show up in the hallway, in the rooms, near the walls. The glass was filthy, stained with grime. But it wasn't the mirrors themselves that bothered me. It was what I saw in them. One night I woke up to see the same figure staring at me from the mirror in the hallway. But this time, something was different. I wasn't in the room. I was standing in the reflection, staring back at myself. But it wasn't me. I reached out and the figure did the same. It mimicked my every movement like a shadow, only more real. Its mouth moved, but no sound came out. "Get out of my head," I whispered. But the figure didn't stop. The next few days were a blur of exhaustion and confusion. I was beginning to lose track of time. I was becoming more and more drawn to the mirrors, the figures in them. The promises they whispered to me in the dark began to tempt me. They promised me peace, rest, escape. All I had to do was step through. One night, I made the mistake of stepping closer to one of the mirrors, letting myself get too close. My body flickered in and out of the reflection, like I was between two worlds. One second I was standing in my room, the next I was among the shadows staring at myself through the glass. I felt myself being pulled. My body ached, my skin prickled, but I couldn't pull myself away. I was frozen. That's when I found something. Hidden among my grandmother's old letters was a correspondence from someone named Van Holden, a ghost hunter who had been scheduled to visit the manor. I quickly wrote him a letter explaining everything that had been happening and that my grandmother had passed away. I needed help. I didn't know if I could survive another night in this house. The shadows were closing in, and I could feel myself slipping. I just hoped that Van Holden would get here before it was too late. Every night for the past week, I've woken up at exactly 3:42 a.m., not approximately, not around that time. Precisely 3:42, according to my phone, my digital alarm clock, and the watch I've started keeping beside my bed to confirm I'm not imagining things. It started last Tuesday. I had just gone to bed around 11:30 after a few hours of scrolling through social media, usual evening routine. My workday had been manageable, nothing too out of the ordinary. I had dinner, leftover pasta, a quick fix, and called my mom like I do every week. Simple, mundane things, nothing to suggest anything out of place. But then I jolted awake with that unmistakable feeling of something being wrong. You know that feeling? The one where your body knows something is off before your mind does. The sense of imminent danger, even though there's no logical reason for it. My heart was already hammering in my chest before I even opened my eyes, and when I did, the room was pitch dark, 3:42 a.m. I lay perfectly still, listening intently. The only sound was the hum of my refrigerator and the occasional car passing by on the street below. The silence was deafening, unsettling, and the air felt thick, almost suffocating. After a few minutes of nothing, I convinced myself it was just a random wake-up, maybe stress from an upcoming project deadline, a one-off occurrence. I rolled over and forced myself back to sleep. Nothing to worry about. Just a strange coincidence. The next night, I made a conscious effort to avoid caffeine after 4 p.m. I skipped my usual late-night social media scroll and opted to read instead, believing that would help me sleep better. I fell asleep easily around 11 and woke up at 3:42 a.m. This time, the feeling wasn't just a sense of wrongness. It was stronger, more distinct, a deep, gnawing sense that I wasn't alone. It wasn't just the sensation that something was off, but a cold presence looming in the darkness. I could feel my heart racing in my throat as I stared into the black void of my bedroom, straining to make out any shapes, any movement. My bedroom door was slightly ajar, a habit I had kept since childhood. I always left it open just a crack, not enough to let in light, but enough to let me know I wasn't completely sealed off. And tonight, I wished I hadn't. Nothing moved in the dark, not even the usual creaks or groans of the old building settling. My breath came in shallow gasps, and every little noise sent my body into a frenzy, my heart pounding in my chest. After several agonizing minutes, I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it across the room, then into the living room. Empty. Of course, it was empty. The silence stretched on, suffocating me. I lay there in the dark, trying to convince myself it was nothing, just a bad night's sleep. That's all. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. On the third night, I felt the unease creep back in with a vengeance. I had taken melatonin, tried everything to get a decent night's sleep, but it didn't help. I woke up at 3:42 a.m. again, but this time I was sitting upright in bed, drenched in sweat. My shirt clung to my skin, and my pulse raced. My hands were shaking, but the fear wasn't what disturbed me the most. It was the fact that I had no memory of sitting up. I hadn't consciously moved. It was as though I had been pulled from sleep into full awareness in the blink of an eye, and it felt unnatural. And that's when I noticed it, the smell. It wasn't like food burning or an electrical fire, but something much worse. It was faint, almost undetectable at first, but once it hit me, I couldn't ignore it. It was like hair or nails being burned. A sharp, acrid scent that made my stomach churn. I jumped out of bed, frantically checking the outlets, unplugging anything I could, checking the walls for unusual warmth. I searched the entire apartment, looking for the source of the smell, but when I checked everything, there was nothing. The smell faded as quickly as it had appeared, and I was left standing in the middle of my living room, heart pounding, wondering if I had imagined the whole thing. I sent a message to my friend Mia the next day, trying to sound casual. Hey, random question. Ever had a time when you wake up at exactly the same time every night? Her reply came quickly, like when my son was a newborn and I had to feed him at 2 a.m. No, more like without any reason. I keep waking up at 3:42 a.m. exactly, and it's kind of freaking me out. Her response was nonchalant. Probably stress, or maybe your upstairs neighbor has a weird schedule. Our bodies are sensitive to patterns. I sighed with relief. That made sense. Maybe the guy above me was doing something at that time. It was a simple explanation, something that made me feel like this was all just a coincidence. Until night 4. It was 3:42 a.m. again, and I woke up to the sound of footsteps in my living room. Light, careful steps. Someone trying not to be heard. I held my breath, every muscle in my body frozen, terrified to make a sound. I didn't want to believe what was happening. My mind screamed at me that it was just my imagination, but deep down I knew. I stayed still, listening. The footsteps stopped. Then came the sound of something scraping, like furniture being moved, slowly, carefully, as if whoever was in my apartment didn't want me to notice. I waited for a few seconds, then grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands were trembling as I pressed the call button, but before it could connect, I heard the footsteps again. They were right outside my bedroom door. I felt a sudden surge of anger. This was my apartment. If someone had broken in, they had violated my sanctuary, the place where I was supposed to be safe. I grabbed the baseball bat I'd kept beside my bed, just in case, and slowly crept toward the door. My breath was shallow, my heart pounding in my ears. I opened the door. The living room was empty. Nothing had been disturbed. The front door was still chained from the inside, and all the windows were locked. I checked the entire apartment, my heart racing with every creak of the floorboards. I looked under the bed, behind the shower curtain, and even inside the fridge and cabinets. But there was no one. But that's when I noticed it. The couch had moved. Not much, just a few inches, but it was enough to make me question everything. I checked the angles in the room, and I was sure it had been positioned differently when I left earlier that evening. I spent the rest of the night with every light on, the baseball bat still in hand, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. By the time morning came, I convinced myself it was just my imagination. Maybe I had bumped the couch myself, or the weird stress was playing tricks on me, but things only got worse. The next evening, I set up my laptop to record the living room overnight, hoping to catch something, anything, that might explain the strange occurrences. I took a sleeping pill to ensure I would sleep through whatever 3:42 a.m. had in store. It didn't work. At exactly 3:42 a.m., I woke up again, feeling groggy from the pill, but fully aware of the unnatural silence in the room. I lay still for a moment, listening to the eerie quiet. There was no sound at all. No fridge hum, no outside noise, not even the sound of the air conditioning. Then I saw it. My bedroom door started to move, slowly creaking open. I wasn't imagining it. I hadn't touched the door, and there was no draft to explain it. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam revealed an empty living room, just like the night before. But when I checked the recording, something was off. At exactly 3:42 a.m., the video cut to static. For 1 full minute, the feed was completely blank before returning to the same empty living room. The footage seemed to show everything as normal, but I knew it wasn't. I could feel it. I called out of work the next day and spent the entire afternoon researching carbon monoxide poisoning, sleep disorders, and anything that could explain this bizarre phenomenon. I even called my landlord hoping for some logical answer, but he laughed it off. Like what? Ghosts? It's a modern building, only 15 years old. Nothing spooky here. Then came the night I stayed at Mia's. She had no idea what was really going on, so I told her my heating system was acting up. I spent the night on her couch, comforted by the presence of her family. At 3:42 a.m., I woke up again. The living room was dark, save for the glow of the cable box. I didn't feel scared this time, just frustrated, and that's when I heard it. A small voice. "Who are you talking to?" It was Mia's 5-year-old son, standing in the hallway, his stuffed dinosaur clutched tightly in his hands. "I'm not talking to anyone, buddy," I whispered, trying to brush it off. "Go back to bed." But he didn't move. He pointed to the corner of the room. "The tall man. He's bending down to whisper in your ear." I'm writing this from my car, parked outside a 24-hour diner. I don't know what's happening, but I'm terrified. I can't go back home. I can't risk it. Mia's son saw something I didn't, and I don't know if I can survive whatever it is that's following me. It's almost 3:41 p.m., and in exactly 12 hours, it will be 3:42 a.m. again. I don't know what will happen then, but I'm scared it won't be just another restless night. I need answers. I need guidance. If you've experienced something like this before, or know anyone who can help, please reach out. I can't do this alone. Whatever is in that apartment is getting closer, and I don't know how much longer I can last. If you have any advice or know someone who has dealt with things like this, please get in touch with me at duskynights1gmail.com.